Hello, this is Critters Creation. Today I want to show you the magic circle. This skill has so many uses and so many patterns, whether it's amigurumi or hats, suggest starting with the magic circle, that it is really helpful. Even granny squares usually suggest starting with the magic circle, and it's the way that you can be sure that that center opening really just closes and you can't see through it. So I just grabbed the yarn that was closest to me. This is my Scrubology yarn. And I just grabbed the hook I was using on the project. The previous project which was a 6.5. You can do this with any size hook. So I start with the tail in my hand. And I'm going to wrap it around 3 fingers. Cross the first piece. And then I'm going to just put my pinky down. I'm going to do that again. Start with the tail in my hand. Wrap around 3 fingers. Cross. So I need to go over that first piece and then hold it. Put the hook under. Grab the second. Turn. And then chain 1 to help sort of secure it in place. I'm going to do that one more time before I go any further. Tail in my hand. I'm going to wrap it around my fingers, 3 fingers, and then I cross it. And then I'm just going to secure it with my pinky so it doesn't move around. But it does need to be able to move because that's my working yarn. Go under the first, grab the second, pull up, twist, and chain 1. When I first started magic rings, they drove me nuts and I was not good at them, so I quit. Then I made myself go back and keep trying, and I figured it out, and it sort of became second nature. Now, based on whatever your pattern says, if I don't typically count that as a stitch, if your pattern says to, go ahead and do that. At this point, you could do single crochets, double crochets, half double. If you want to do a double, you're just going to put a second chain there to get up to the correct height. I'm going to do some singles. You can adjust the size of this ring by pulling on the circle or the tail. I'm going to single crochet like I would. I'm going to pull up a loop. Yarn over, pull through. Pull up a loop. Yarn over, pull through. Pull up a loop. Yarn over, pull through. I'm just going to do a few more of those so we can see how this comes together. I have no idea how many this is, but that's okay. When you have whatever the pattern calls for, first off, I like to make sure that it's not twisted. So sometimes I will just straighten it out a little bit. And then I need to close this circle. So as I pull, and you may think, oh, it was hard to pull, it must be done. No, you can get more, but you have to pull the string tight but sort of gentle. And that one is much better. I will continue to try to crochet over this tail for a good chunk of the next round, just so it's secure. All right. If you're not sure where your stitch is that you started, I would go back to this. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. I'm not even sure how many stitches I made. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Looks like it's right there if you're not sure. You can always count backwards and find it. That right there is my chain 1 from making the magic circle. I'll skip that. Sometimes if I'm not paying attention, I will not skip that, and then I'm just throwing off the measurements or throwing off the stitch count. I'm going to go to that first stitch, put it through there, pull up a loop. Again, I said I often crochet over. All right, because with magic circles, usually that second row, you put 2 stitches in each one as a way to make that circle get bigger. I don't crochet over that tail over the whole row, but I do for a bit of it. This circle is starting to open up, so I can just tighten it again. I have found by the time I get the second row done, this does not keep opening up. Personal experience, I don't know if it's true for everybody. All right, this yarn is, as I said, it's a scrubby yarn, so the hook does not slide through it quite as easily. I probably should have picked just a regular yarn. All right, so that was the start of putting 2 stitches in every stitch just to, on the increase. You can tell which is the front and which is the back as you get used to it. As normal, the front just has a little bit of a neater look. But I find these very helpful, and the more I practice, the more it just became second nature. But I like the fact that you can pull that circle closed. If you do let me show you here. Let me rip this out. And if I were just to do the alternative, which make a slip knot, chain 4, sometimes they'll say chain 3, and then slip stitch back to the first one. There's your circle that you could start now crocheting into, like for round 1. You could, and then you have you're starting round 1, but the problem is you can't tighten this so that hole just stays open. This works, but then you may have to save part of that tail to weave in and out so it hides it. And if that's the case, you're going to want a longer tail so you don't run out of yarn. But I love the magic circle, which I will do one more time. Tail in my hand. I'm going to wrap it around 3 fingers and then cross. See. So I'm going to cross it over. Just secure it with my pinky. Doesn't have to be super tight. Hook under the first. Grab the second. Pull up. Twist. And chain 1. Once I have that, I take the hand that's holding the circle and I just flip it over. I need the tail of my yarn on this side so I can crochet over it. Okay, take my working yarn. I know I have a crazy hold on how I hold yarn. That goes back to me being self-taught. But it works for me. This, again, you can make this bigger or smaller by pulling the string or pulling on the circle. I usually like it just to be long enough that or wide enough that I can put a couple fingers in there to hold this steady. Depending on what your pattern says, this does not have to count as a stitch. I'm going to pull up a loop and I have a single crochet. You could put half double crochets, double crochets. If you need to do double crochets, you're going to need to chain 2 to get the correct height. If you notice, I am going to be crocheting over the tail just to help secure it in place. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This circle I feel is getting a little bit bigger again. So I'm just going to shrink it a little further down so it's easier to manipulate. All right, that was 6. I'm just going to do 2 more. 7, 8. Right. Sometimes as you do this, part of it will twist. It will probably work itself back out if you just pull the string, but I always like to make sure that it looks nice and pretty and not twisted. Grab the tail. And I am just going to pull. And you may think, oh, hey, this is absolutely great. But you still got a hole there. You can usually take the yarn tighter without snapping it, but just be gentle with it and it will close. So there we go. So I did 8 stitches. So you could always count around if you're not sure where that first stitch is. And you could say 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you need to count around, you can absolutely do that. Sometimes your first chain you can see it here. If I'm not paying attention, I will add extra stitches all day long. But I'm going to slip stitch to the first single crochet I made. And now I'm going to start the increase. Usually that is 2 stitches per previous, so I'm not counting that slip stitch. If I was going to do a row of double crochet, I would want to make sure I chained enough to get the correct height, but I'm just going to do a single. So I've crocheted over that with 1 stitch. I'm going to go back into that same stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through. So because on the increase you have to usually do 2 stitches. When I do single crochet, sometimes I find it difficult to know where that first stitch is on row 2 because the single crochets aren't very tall. So sometimes I'll just put a stitch marker in there to know, okay, that's where I started. All right, second stitch. I'm going to put 2 in for each one. All right, there is the third stitch. Oh, let's try that again. All right, if that center of that magic circle starts to open, just pull that tail again. And what I have found in my experience, if I keep that circle closed, by the time I finish this second round, this will not open up anymore. I'm guessing that second round holds it in place. But I am not a professional. I am self-taught with YouTube all the way. So that's the basics of a magic circle. They're super helpful to learn, and they just give things a nice look. So do you have a different way to do a magic circle? Or do you have something completely alternate to a magic circle that you find helpful? I would love to know. All right, thanks. Bye.